Like always, I hope you're doing well. You're gonna sound my voice is I've been sick. I getting better, but it's been hitting me for a few days, quite some days. So if I cough, I apologize, but you're gonna hear me not on my best because I'm coming out of something in this time of the year. Weather-wise, I believe it's nothing serious. Okay. Um, we're gonna do watercolor. Get your paper out, like always. Your simple watercolor set, uh, brushes. The simple, sorry, just one brush. I have a few here, but I'm gonna actually use the one more like you guys have a round brush, a small round brush, maybe number two, one, okay, um, two or three, um, in your water, right? And what we're gonna do, if you only have one sheet of paper, I know the thing that we struggle to acquire is paper because, right, we paint one painting, then we need another piece of paper. Everything else we could keep. So watercolor paper is, um, necessary, and it has to be thick of a certain weight so it can absorb the water. Otherwise, you're not gonna do watercolors. It's not gonna have that effect. Okay, you cannot use regular paper. It has to be watercolor paper, which has a certain weight, which means thickness and heaviness and grain, so it can absorb the water. All right. So in that paper, we're going to do two images, two landscapes, more likely. Okay. So get your materials out, and they're gonna be very simple, but we're gonna go straight into the painting. Then afterwards, you could cut it right in the middle. I'm gonna do a little bending, not too harsh. You see, I make sure the corners match, and then I just tap it right here in the middle. And this gives me an idea of where the middle is. Okay, right there. But the paper is not like extremely damaged with a bend, because then it will bend, right, and your water will run to the side. Okay, so I know where my middle is right here. I don't know if you see that bend. Okay, perfect. So let's do the sky. This one is mostly sky. Gonna be a water scene to the left. Um, so I'm gonna wet 3/4 of the paper on this side fast because I don't want it to dry up. I might use a tissue because by the time you're done wetting all this part up here, the bottom will be dry. The paper absorb all of that. So I'm really grabbing just water literally, and with the brush, making sure it's everywhere. You could use the light of the lamp to make sure everything is being covered. And it has. Okay. So the thing in this one is we're gonna make sure that we leave some. You see the shininess is everywhere. That tells me there's no gaps. If there was a gap, it won't shine. Gap meaning I need to wet that area because the paper hasn't got wet. Okay. So the parts in the sky that are still gonna be white as clouds, I will leave alone. We're gonna basically drop blue in those gaps, which is the sky. So watch me first. and it's gonna be kind of like in an angle horizontally. So see the gaps that are left blue when you think about it is the actual sky, and the white is the clouds. Does that make sense? So over here on the top, maybe there's more blue. So the white are clouds. Did you see that? And the blue is the sky. I'm gonna add more blue, more intensity in some areas. But be careful because where you add more blue, that's the actual blue the sky is. So you gotta spread it out. It cannot be just in one part that the sky is only that certain blue. Okay, so you wanna keep it even. But the softness where the blue becomes a little lighter, that's fine because that's where the cloud is coming on to be. Down here, I put more blue because usually, right, there's no clouds touching the ground or the earth. Perfect. And that's it. Something as simple as this. Okay. See that sky? Because the paper was wet, it becomes like that, like a little diffused. All right. That's our sky. I'm gonna let it dry a little. Then we're gonna do our ocean here, and the beach is at the beach. Put some trees, and that's our scene. I mean, our first scene. Okay, so this is gonna be kind of half and half, half water, half sand, and the horizon has some trees. Okay, so let's differentiate the blue from the sky from the blue of the water just by adding, making the blue of the water a tiny little different by adding a certain color, a little greenish, I guess. We want to keep it light, so this is wet on dry. And the way it comes down here when it meets the sand, it's a little curvy, two curves. That's it. All right. It's a little greenish, as you can see, a little different from the sky blue, but it's still blue. The yellow of the sand, we gotta be careful, okay? We don't want it too bright, so it's gotta be very watered down yellow. So if you put too much, like I just did in this moment, then you use all the next things as water to spread that color so it's not too bright. Try to keep your brush stroke horizontal. Okay. See, I kept the light with the water on purpose. And if your paper gets very saturated with water, that's fine because that's the whole point of watercolor. See how everything's been done very lightly? It's a very light yellow. We did not emphasize actual too strong. So you got to control the intensity of your color. Okay, let's put some very light green mountains in the horizon. Coming higher here, very little higher, and coming down narrower. Because if you think about it, if this is the sand, the land is to the left. So if we see mountains in the horizon, they should dissipate as they come closer to the ocean, because this is kind of like the edge of the coast. Um, okay, so they mostly will be in this side. Again, we're keeping it light, so every color you use, excuse me, should be um, the intensity should be toned down with water, so the color becomes lighter. And this is called layering too, because it's going over the blue. Look how light that is. You cannot barely see that mountain, but we're gonna add a little more. We're gonna add a little more so you guys can see it. And the little bumps up and down are the mountains. I'm gonna add water towards the bottom of it so it blends in with the sand a little. You see, just by adding water, they both colors kind of mix, and that's it. It's very wet right now in here. So we're gonna go back there and add some trees, but we have to wait for it to kind of dry. All right. I'm gonna try something, okay? And it is that you see this patch of water. We want to erase this. We don't want this to be seen. when that happens. Okay, so what I was trying to say is that I'm going to try with my brush to um, have a clean brush. Hold on. There you go. I'm going to try to have a clean brush and pass it around a couple of times in this curve, a little again to the side. And what I'm actually will be doing is kind of picking up a little bit of the color. Because by the brush being clean with water, not too much saturated but wet, it's going to work as a sponge picking up that green. So going like this, and it won't be extremely white, but it will pick up that green in those spots and kind of give a little highlight as if it's the foam of the waves. Does that? Let's see if that works. Again, wet but not too much saturated, because if you saturate it, then what will happen is the water would just go down into the paper. We want the brush to be wet so it absorbs the green, but not like leave down the water into the painting. Okay, it has to be clean. Let's see. It's like picking up, and you got to do it a couple of times. Let me give you an example. You see when I go like this here and I keep rubbing, look how I kind of like drew a line right here at the bottom. Let me get it focused first. Sorry. Let's get the painting on focus. Down here. See that line that the brush is pointing here? Sorry. It was done by rubbing my clean brush into that little area. So that's what I'm trying to do here in a wavy line. And you could also do lines that are a little more green, more darker. So it emphasizes that brightness. So you emphasize bright by, light, by also the surrounding black. So that's the famous claroscuro. You cannot have the highlight, right, with the part that is bright without next to it the darkness. If everything is bright, there's no highlight. So I could go. This is what I mean. If I grab a little more green and I put it in between, you see that how the highlight now emphasizes. I'm putting the water in between. I mean, the blue is green. Okay. I'm gonna make this up here a little more darker because it's where the water is being a little more deep. Or coming from the ocean, I guess. I don't know. Okay. This is closer, this is far away. So just because it's far away is that I'm making it a little darker. That's all. That's what I meant to say. Okay. That's probably too dark. So I need to spread it out. But you guys get the idea. Okay. All right. I think by now this is a little more dry. So we're gonna grab that same green, but a little less water. So it's a little more green to do little, not dots, but shapes that are, let's see how dark this is. That's light enough. I'm gonna make them a little darker, but there's a tree far in the distance. I'm gonna do a bunch line up, okay? And some of them are gonna be darker than that. But every shape is different. You make them darker by putting less water. Some of them can be united at the bottom. I'm gonna soon drop some shade, another maybe color, a little brownish under them to give them to ground them. You'll find that when you do things, sometimes you need to ground them. They look like they're floating. You may do, let's say, for example, you do a street and a sidewalk, and then you do people walking in the sidewalk, but they still look like they're floating. So you want to either give them a little shadow. You don't have to emphasize it too much. It's just a little tiny watch where you kind of ground them. You can see that in paintings all the time. When they don't ground them, they may put things around them, the people that are on the floor, like I don't know, little trash, like cigarettes or um, wrappers, and that still is part of the entire picture, and it grounds the image. Otherwise, things will look floating in the air. Right. So I'm using a different color, so we don't get confused. A little brown. It's not really brown because it's gonna be so light. But it helps us visually. Oh, sorry. I'm not using the same color green because then it will alter the image of the trees. So this is where sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, it's good to have another piece of watercolor paper, even if it's small, to test what you're gonna do. I cannot. Well, I could test here. That's pretty light. Yep. You see, I put it and I clean it. It could be a little lighter. Okay. And that same brown, we could put in some of the sand. Okay, not everywhere, but just some. Kind of dirty the yellow. Dirty the ground, if you want to call it like that. I'm using my finger to take away some of that. There you go. So now the yellow is a little more dirty. You see? but we could make out that these are trees. You know, I'm gonna put something here, obviously another tree to kind of like connect this here so they're not floating. Um, not floating like so it doesn't look like they are not joined. Excuse me. But today we learned that technique, which we done before about the sky. You know, everything that you leave white like that, it could be a highlight, it could be a building that is white. In this case, it's the clouds. But just remember your whites. Um, Ahead of time, you need to know where they are all the time, either by leaving the paper white or you mask the paper, meaning you cover the paper. There's material you could cover the paper, kind of like a gummy material. Then you put it down with a brush. It's not glue, it doesn't stick, but it covers, and then you paint, and then you rub it off, and that area stays white because paint never touched it. But my point is, that's a different, material you could acquire. But what I'm saying is, when you started the painting, you knew where those whites were. Okay. In this case, I didn't know exactly where the cloud was, but I knew I wanted to leave some gaps in this pattern to make the clouds the effect of the clouds. You don't have to know exactly like how they're gonna be, but if there was a highlight of like reflection or water or things like that, right? You want to emphasize that. So another technique. There's tons of techniques to bring out those whites. You could leave the paper, like I said. You could mask, or and I just got one this past week. You could buy a gouache or acrylic paint, but gouache is I don't know. It doesn't matter. But the idea is that it's an opaque white. Okay, opaque means that it's not transparent, that is heavy in pigment. So basically, if right now I were to put this white on top of this water, it's gonna show. Okay, because it's heavy, it's opaque. So at the end, you do your highlights with this white or acrylic. So you have a little tube. This is small, but I I'm gonna transfer it to a even smaller tube so I could carry it around. Um, so you could get that. We're not using that, as you saw. I'm not using that. You don't need to have that, but it's something good for you to know. Um, and yeah, so that's what opaque means. Because if you were to use white in watercolor, right, you put it and it's nothing will happen because it's too transparent. Watercolors, when you have water in them, it's all about transparency. So that's why we need to work from light to dark. If you notice, um, the trees, which are a little more darker, came out after. You know, you should know this by now. You work from light to dark. You put your darks at the end. All right. So the next one will be on this side, and at the end, like I said, you could cut this in half and have two paintings. Um, I gotta say, we could put something in this corner sticking out, like some grass or plant or flower, and then you get that, background, middle ground, foreground, the flowers or whatever you put here being in the foreground. But I'm not gonna do that in this one myself. I don't think, I don't know. But that's an idea that you could do if you want. You could put some green um, strikes like this representing grass. Um, and when you think about it visually, that allows our eye to come from here and move towards the right. So from left to right, right? So it will be like a wall. Our eye will not dissipate because we know that this continues. If you put something here, it will stop. So it will make us go from here and move to the right. Just like when you open a book, you open a door, or you read, or you write, you go from left to right. Our world, like I keep saying, is a right-handed world, so you go from left to right. And visually, it's pleasant. Right now, when you look at it, it's balanced, it's great, it's a nice picture. But just be aware of those little things if you wanna. Sometimes this is very appealing, but a little extra. Some artists they think of everything. You don't have to do it, but right now our eye knows that this water will continue and that this sand will continue. So that's all. Sometimes sometimes we angle things or we put things to make a starting point or to stop, right? So if we go from here and we move, there may be something here that stops us. Um, all right. So over here, it's just very simple. Like I just said, we're gonna build from lights to dark colors. But in this case, we'll do a lot more like trees. And we're gonna also leave gaps on the paper. And in this sense, it will help us just to see our image better. So sometimes we do that too. You leave the paper right white, or it doesn't have to be white. You could give it a wash, a very light wash of something, blue or green, and then that emphasize that leaving the paper like that. When you do your colors, they just are more. You can discern and see the picture better. So. um, let's get started. Let's pretend or say it's kind of like fall, or we could do it in green, right? Trees are green, and we know that. Um, but in this case, I'm gonna leave it fall colors or warm colors, and those are um, red, orange, right, yellow in the fall. There will be earth colors, which are like also will have brown or beige. So let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna put yellow and orange as if it was the leaves, you know. I'm doing those and building them a little. They're very yellow, but now I'm spreading them. And you see what I mean? I'm leaving. You can see the paper obviously in between. Some of them are big, some of them are smaller. These are just blobs of color. So there's going to be a tree here, maybe a couple. And even though we might see just a little bit of one here, there's one over to here to the left. So now I'll add the orange. So make sure you leave room for that. I'm gonna put a little bit on the ground. We could do that later. We could do later, like if some leaves fell on the ground, you know. But let's switch to the orange. I'm not entirely covering my yellow, as you can see. But also you need to make excuse me, big patches. But I don't want to cover everything in between. I still want to leave some gaps that are white. That's what I've been saying about showing the paper, you know, so then we can see the image better. It all comes to, your call, your decision. um I also gonna use the orange to distinguish between the two trees, so I won't put that much in here in between. So now there's this chunk and there's this area, you know. Let's see. So big chunks are good, okay. But let's do the trunks. Let's build our picture. Like I always say, sometimes it's really good to get your picture in a state that is very clear, so you could visualize it better. I know right now you guys just see these chunks of orange and yellow, and that's it. But I'm gonna put the trunks, and it's brown. Again, this is not pure brown because it will be too dark and too emphasized. So I'm gonna start kind of light. So it comes from down here up. It's gonna branch out. You see? So here comes a branch, and I don't do the whole thing. I cut in between, so it seems that there's leaves and things that are covering the branch. The other one comes here. You see? You see how we got our tree? You get the idea? So you could build with this and kind of work organically. So here's what I don't want you to just think, oh, let me replicate this. Exactly what Antonio did. Um, you could try, yes, but I want you to do your own branches, your own tree. Make sure that you see how now when I put more pure brown, I could actually emphasize um, the image. Maybe there's another one here, smaller. And there's another one that comes out of here. Remember that as the tree is coming down into the ground or comes out of the ground, things are thicker coming down into the ground because that's how the tree gets support. And these little lines that I'm doing are just branches, tips of branches that we can see because the rest is covered by by the color orange and green. Okay, so now I can see that I'm gonna start with my brown. Clean my brush, go back to my yellow and orange to build more. See, now I see things a little better, so I know where I may need some more orange or yellow. These are your calls and your decisions. So yellow, clean my orange. Actually, no, let me get more orange over here maybe. Now the yellow. Excuse me. And the ground. So for the ground, I'm just going to do patches, but falling more a little bit horizontal. Patches and lines. You know? And I'll use some brown and darken the bottom because with all these trees and things, when you think about it, they should create a shade. They should cast, and darken this area. So now we're going to go with our orange. Okay. So now I want to put some green, like there's some trees that are green in the back here, but just like bushes, you know. So it's very light and shaped like, especially the top is shaped like the top of that roundness at the top. So now I emphasize with a little more darkness here, but you see the gap of the white that still let us see the picture. So that's what I mean. So now to finish, that brownish kind of color more in between here with the purpose of darkening these areas. Because when you think about it again, trees should cast a shadow. So I still want to see my orange. I still want to see my yellow. I'm grounding these trees, but I'm giving them like a shadow. Not a shadow, like a shade in the ground. I'm putting a lot because this area is wet because there's yellow and orange that are still wet. So I'm bringing a lot of brown because I know it's going to dissipate, you see. So these are all calls you do as you're painting. I'm keeping it horizontal also to ground it. Things that are horizontal tend to be in the ground, especially, or water grounds things, right? Just like the floor or the horizon. Great. I may do more here when it's close to the trees, you know. But you get the idea. What I'm gonna do now is add more orange or maybe a little reddish. We know orange has red, so I'm not putting pure red. But let's see what happens if in some of the areas we make it richer by adding red. Not red like, orange. It's still orange, but I'm just giving it some areas a little more volume. So what happens is, like, let's say you do a tree, right? We'll do that probably if you want next time. So what I'm doing now is, like, let's say we do a tree, right? Just like, well, this is in color, but let's stick to imagine it's green. I use just one green. And the fact that it's watercolor and I use different amounts of water, that gives me a little bit of a different green because the intensity changes. Is one is lighter, one is more um, a little more darker, but it becomes more even interesting if you add a different color to the green and put it on the picture too. So then what happens is now you're getting two more greens into the tree. And right now that's what we're doing. We had yellow, we had orange, but by bringing this orange that is a little more reddish, it adds volume to the tree. Look at all this orange down here, right? Even though there's water, this is lighter, this is darker. So this is lighter. Sorry, this is lighter, lighter, darker orange. But when I add like a more intense reddish orange, it's just add more interesting aspects to the picture because now there's depth. Maybe this reddish orange, right? Since it's a little more darker, the tone means there's more volume. It's more thick. Our eyes work like that. So you want to diversify in tones. Colors, yes, but also tones. I could have all different colors, but if they're the same tone, which means the same like lightness, it becomes pretty flat. Now, if I add different tones, as you can see, the trunk of the tree is a darker tone than the green. Then the tree stands out, and in this case, comes closer to us. We already know that rule. Darker things and more detail things look they are that they're closer to us. Okay, I'm gonna end it like this. Is the time to sign? But I hope you learn or put in practice some of the techniques we've done. Like always, excuse me, you're free to look at the video again, do the painting again, maybe do this bigger or this one also bigger in the whole page. Um, and yeah, you could pause the video. Um, you could go back, you know, you can do the painting again, make it a card, make it a gift. But now we have here our two paintings. Don't worry, I'm gonna bring them closer, focus, so you can see the details. But I'm gonna sign them. Um, but you get the idea. This is our first look at the sky, in which we left the wideness of the paper to be the clouds. Remember, we wet the entire sky with clean water, but when we put the blue, it dissipates and diluted because the paper was wet. So that's called wet on wet. And we left on purpose white to create the clouds. I emphasize a lot of blue on the top because that's a lot of the sky, and I emphasize a lot of the blue at the bottom because that's where clouds could still come out from down here, but I just wanted to make it a little more real, you see, by keeping the clouds in the center of the sky. Okay, and then let me wait for it to focus. If I wait a little, it's for it to focus right there. Then we have the trees and the mountains. You see how simple that is? The trees are just basically dots. It's all about understanding. I didn't put too much emphasis, uh, opaque green. It wasn't that intense green, but it was a little darker than the mountains, so they can stand out. So just understanding that. Then we have the yellow of the sand at the shore, but we dirty it with a little brown where I rub my finger, and that's what it looks like. It's dry, but it's because I rub my finger. So now the yellow looks kind of a little brownish in some areas. And that yellow was actually not too bright yellow. Remember, it was watered down. And then we have the water of the ocean, in which I'll show you how to kind of pick up some of the color at the end, but then put in between it the blue again. So I'm emphasizing the brightness of this um, foam as the water comes on shore. Yes, by picking up the color, but also by adding the green and the blue in between those lines, so that brightness emphasizes. So you got to think of it as both ways, making the highlight bright, yes, but also maybe adding the color that's next to it. So, I mean, the green in this case, or blue of the water, to then emphasize that. And that was the first we did. Excuse me. And the second one was kind of like a fall forest, this kind of thing, where I left the we left the white of the paper also, um, to emphasize the yellow and the orange the of the trees. The brown in i- interconnected is branches, and wherever you don't see the branches that we didn't paint them is because we're making him believe that the leaves are covering the branches, right? It looks like a mess, right? But down here are the trunks. Back there is green that represents, I don't know, bushes. Some yellow and orange that represents as if leaves has fallen, and a lot of brown to ground those trees, especially where the tree trunks are, because that will be the area where most of the shade from the trees will be at the trunk base. And when you look from far, then it makes a little more sense. Everything you see, and this could be a card. This could be something you write on the back, um, a gift. Okay, so I hope you enjoy again. Oop. You could do this again, get better at it. Um, Add things. You could put some birds. I know some of you like to put some seagulls in the sky, especially of uh, the beach scene. And yeah, get those skills. Understanding watercolor makes you better and more confident. It's all about confidence and understanding how the water behaves and keeping that transparency and control of your colors. Great. So I know. Thank you for bearing with me and my voice. By the next time you hear from me, I'm sure I'll be normal, better, but I'm coming out of something that got me. Stay safe. Love you guys. And I hope to see you all very soon. Okay.